Rachel was the first child of the Tran family, born in the sticky heat of a Sacramento summer, in a house that always felt just a little too quiet when she was around and far too loud when she wasn't. As the eldest daughter of Vietnamese immigrants, she had learned early that love in her family wasn't handed out evenly. It was a currency, rationed, earned, and, in her case, withheld. From the moment her younger brother Daniel was born, Rachel could feel the gravity in the household shift, like someone had tilted the floorboards and everything valuable rolled toward him. Daniel was the boy, the hope, the future of the family. Rachel? She was the trial run, the almost, the spare. It wasn't spoken aloud, never directly. Her parents never said, "We love him more." But it was in the way her father stood taller when Daniel answered a math question at the dinner table. It was in the way her mother saved the last piece of pork belly for him without even asking if Rachel wanted it. It was in the way every compliment directed toward her came with a qualifier. "You're smart for a girl," or "not bad, but Daniel, he's really got a gift." Her bedroom was the last one down the hall, small enough that her twin-sized bed pressed against two walls, leaving barely enough room to walk. There was one tiny window, half swallowed by the overgrown hedge outside, which filtered the sunlight into a sad, greenish hue. The room smelled faintly of dust and detergent, no matter how often she cleaned it. It was the kind of space that didn't feel lived in, it felt tolerated. And maybe that's how her parents saw her too. Not loved, not even resented, just tolerated. Rachel grew up listening to the muffled sound of her brother's piano lessons, the voices of their parents fussing over his school projects, the proud laughter when he brought home a spelling bee trophy. From her corner of the house, she existed in a quiet fog of invisibility. She did her homework. She got straight A's. She didn't complain. She taught herself how to braid her own hair when her mother was too busy making Daniel's favorite soup. She didn't expect praise. She didn't even expect fairness anymore. Just space. Just a room to herself. But even that proved negotiable. When Daniel turned 13 and needed more room to focus on his studies, Rachel's room was suddenly repurposed. Her father announced it at dinner like it was already decided. "Rachel, you'll move to the storage room. It's temporary. Daniel needs space." No apology. No discussion. Rachel nodded, too stunned to protest. She packed her books, her sketch pads, the ceramic fox she'd made in art class, the one no one had noticed, and moved into a room where the walls still smelled of mothballs and mildew. Her mother handed her a sheet to cover the shelves of old Christmas ornaments and unused rice cookers. "It's only for a while," she said. But a while lasted 3 years. What they didn't know, what they didn't care to ask, was that Rachel was quietly building something in that cramped little room. Late at night, under the faint hum of a desk lamp she bought from a thrift store, she drew blueprints. At first, they were childish. A castle, a bakery with a slide, a house made entirely of glass. But as she grew, the drawings matured. Clean lines, sharp dimensions, dream homes and public spaces that blended function with serenity. Her room may have been small, but in her mind, she was designing worlds. She had a dream of studying architecture, of creating spaces that made people feel seen. But she also knew better than to voice it. Because Rachel knew how dreams were treated in her house. Daniel's dreams were laminated and framed. Hers were treated like dust, swept away with the rest of her childhood. She once tried to bring it up at dinner. "I was thinking about architecture school." Her mother cut her off before the sentence ended. "Architecture? That's not for girls. That's too hard. Why don't you think about accounting?" Her father didn't even look up from his bowl. Rachel swallowed her ambition with the bite of cold rice and nodded. "Okay," she said. She didn't bring it up again. But she didn't stop drawing either. Because deep down, Rachel knew something her family hadn't yet realized. That some people break when they're overlooked. And others? Others learn how to disappear on purpose, so they can return as someone impossible to ignore. And even in that forgotten room, pushed to the farthest corner of the house, Rachel was already laying the foundation for her escape. Script with narration-style breaks. The day Rachel was told to pack her things was the same day she stopped being a daughter and became an afterthought. It wasn't a fight. No yelling. No dramatic slamming of doors. Just a quiet announcement from her father at the dinner table. "Daniel needs his own space to focus on school. Rachel, you'll move into the storage room for now." For now? The phrase hung in the air like a lie everyone had agreed to believe. Rachel stared at her plate of broken rice and grilled pork. Her mother didn't meet her eyes. Daniel kept chewing, smug in the silence. No one asked if she was okay with it. No one even thanked her. So she packed. She folded away her books, her sketch pads, the little dreams she'd drawn at midnight while everyone else was asleep. She took down the string lights she'd hung by herself, the small calendar she'd filled with application deadlines and doodles of buildings she wanted to design one day. Her room, her one small corner of the world, became Daniel's study space overnight. The storage room smelled of mothballs and old incense. The window didn't open, and the only outlet sparked if she plugged in her desk lamp the wrong way. But Rachel said nothing. She adapted, like she always did. What she didn't do was stop dreaming. She'd always wanted to study architecture, to design buildings that made people feel seen, spaces where no girl would be boxed in or pushed aside. She'd researched programs, downloaded brochures, even visited her school counselor in secret. She was ready to tell her parents. "I want to study architecture," she said one night over dinner. Her mother looked up sharply. "Architecture? That's for men. You'll get married, have kids. Why waste money on that?" Rachel blinked. "But you're good at numbers. Study accounting." Her father cut in, eyes still fixed on the television. And that was it. Dreams dismissed. Not because she lacked the talent, but because she was born in the wrong body with the wrong dreams. A girl's ambition, in her house, was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience, something to outgrow before marriage. Daniel, meanwhile, didn't even need to ask. He wanted to study computer science, and just like that, the family rallied behind him. Application fees? Covered. New laptop? Bought. A car for commuting to campus? Leased before he even got his acceptance letter. When Rachel asked about support for college, her father frowned. "You're not being practical. If you really want to go, take loans or get a job. We can't afford both of you." And by both, they meant him. So she did. She took loans. She got a job, several actually. Waitressing on weekends, tutoring high school kids on weeknights, working the front desk at a hotel from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. on holidays. Her life became a balancing act between exhaustion and survival. She studied during bathroom breaks, in the back room of restaurants, on the bus between shifts. She skipped meals to afford textbooks. When her shoes had holes in them, she stuffed them with cardboard and kept walking. Sometimes, she'd pass by the university library and see Daniel through the glass, lounging in a cafe chair, AirPods in, laughing with friends. He never acknowledged her. He didn't need to. He had space. He had support. He had everything. Rachel had none of it, except her fire. That fire burned quietly, almost politely, like a girl taught not to speak too loudly. But it was there. Every time she was told no, she turned it into a reason to keep going. Every slammed door became a blueprint for the house she'd one day build. One where girls like her would never have to ask for permission to dream. She didn't resent hard work. What broke her wasn't the struggle, but the silence. The invisibility. The fact that no one ever asked how she was doing, or if she needed help. She learned to be her own cheerleader. To save every dollar. To ace every exam. To take pride in small victories, like passing out on the couch with her notes on her chest, and waking up still holding a highlighter. She didn't have time for parties, or romance, or sleep, but she had purpose. Years later, at graduation, Rachel stood alone outside the auditorium in her cap and gown. Her parents hadn't come. They were busy attending Daniel's summer internship presentation. "It's more important," her mother had texted. "Your brother's project is with Google." Rachel didn't reply. Instead, she took a photo of herself, not smiling, not posing. Just standing, still, steady, in front of the School of Architecture sign, diploma in hand. That night, she framed the photo and placed it on her wall, the first space she ever claimed for herself. And it wouldn't be the last. Chicago was nothing like Sacramento. There were no silent dinners soaked in unspoken hierarchies, no cramped storage rooms doubling as bedrooms, no casual dismissals of her dreams. What there was instead was air. Cold, sharp, defiant air that cut through her lungs every morning as she walked down Michigan Avenue toward campus. She loved that about Chicago. It didn't pretend to be warm. It didn't hide its cruelty behind politeness. And for the first time in her life, Rachel could breathe. Architecture school was brutal. Competition was stiff, Critiques were merciless, and sleep was a luxury she rarely afforded. She worked as a barista on weekdays, waited tables on weekends, and cleaned an Airbnb in the early hours of Sunday mornings before starting her studio assignments. She built models at 3 a.m. under flickering lamps, hands blistered from hot glue and dull blades. But she never complained, because unlike back home, here, every cut, every bruise, every tear had meaning. Here, no one told her that girls weren't meant to build things. The irony was never lost on her. She was designing spaces for others, while living in one so small she could touch the fridge and bed without moving her feet. She'd sketch floor plans on receipts between coffee orders and read building codes while folding laundry. But she was alive. Alive in a way she'd never been when she was quiet, obedient, and invisible. One winter evening, she stood alone on a bridge overlooking the river, her breath fogging up the freezing air, watching the city lights shimmer on the water. That night, she made herself a promise. If I ever build something of my own, it won't be grand. It won't scream for attention. It'll be something that feels like this, still, powerful, and absolutely mine. Years passed. Degree in hand, Rachel took on projects most graduates would kill for: luxury condos, downtown office spaces, celebrity interiors. She was good, quiet, but brilliant. Her designs didn't shout, they whispered. Soft light, clean lines, hidden strength. Clients didn't just walk into a space she created, they exhaled in it. And slowly, the name Rachel Tran began circulating in architectural circles, not as a social media darling, but as a well-kept secret among those who knew quality. Then came Nest and Form. It started with a napkin sketch at a coffee shop, like most good ideas do. A small design studio, rooted in the idea that beauty lives in restraint. Rachel didn't want to build the tallest towers or win flashy awards. She wanted to create sanctuaries, homes that healed, spaces that felt like silence after years of noise. Nest and Form became known for its ethos: intentional minimalism, emotional functionality, and cultural respect. Clients included authors, therapists, single mothers, people who didn't want palaces, but places that understood them. And Rachel made sure her work did. She hired slowly, carefully, built a team that understood her vision. Vietnamese American interns, queer designers, people who'd been overlooked, just like she once was. And she gave them what she never had: space. Room to breathe, to grow, to speak. But Rachel never became the face of her brand. No interviews. No flashy launch parties. No over-designed Instagram posts. Just quiet excellence. If a reporter called, she declined. If a client praised her publicly, she thanked them, then disappeared into the background. It wasn't humility. It was reclamation. She had spent too long being erased to now crave the spotlight. Her success was not something she needed to shout about. It was something she could feel in the curve of a hallway, the light in a reading nook, the breath a client took when they first walked into their new home. Success didn't mean being seen. It meant never being silenced again. In her studio office, tucked inside a historic brick building in Logan Square, she kept one photo on her desk. It wasn't of awards or high-profile clients. It was a grainy print of her 18-year-old self, standing in front of the University of Illinois at Chicago's School of Architecture sign, holding her acceptance letter with red eyes and a crooked smile. She never told her parents about Nest and Form. They still thought she worked at some office in the city. Daniel was now in tech sales, doing very well, according to their Christmas cards. He had a house in Cupertino, a wife, 2 kids. They never asked Rachel much. And that was fine, because every now and then, someone would walk into her studio: an immigrant mother seeking a new start, a queer teen wanting their first apartment, a woman fleeing a marriage, and Rachel would sit down with them, roll out the sketch paper, and say softly, "Let's design a space that's yours." She didn't need applause. She was building cathedrals out of quiet. And in the silence, Rachel finally found her place. Rachel had come a long way from the girl who once lived in the dimly lit room at the end of the hallway. The room where her existence felt as small and unnoticed as the space it occupied. Her journey from Sacramento to Chicago had been a fight for her own space, not just physically, but emotionally and professionally. As she settled into her new life in the Windy City, balancing work and school, she had never imagined that this chapter of her life would lead her back to a place she swore she'd left behind. The call came on a Thursday morning, a routine call from a potential client. Rachel answered the phone with the practiced calm she had cultivated over the years, as if everything about her life was neatly in place. But that calm was shattered when the client mentioned the location of the project, California. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. As an architect, the opportunity to work on a project in California was huge. But the real shock came when she was told the address. It was a house she recognized, a house she had seen from the outside many times as a child. The same house where her parents had thrown Daniel a lavish party when he graduated high school. The same house that had always seemed just out of reach, both literally and figuratively. Rachel hesitated before accepting the contract. It wasn't just a project, it was her past staring back at her, taunting her. But in that moment, she told herself it was just a job, nothing more. She would design, take the money, and move on. Or so she thought. Arriving in California felt surreal, almost like stepping into a dream she had never wanted to live. The house was stunning, modern, yet warm. The type of home she had always admired but never thought she'd have the chance to design for someone else. As she walked through the spacious rooms, envisioning the design transformation, Rachel felt an uncomfortable tug in her chest. She was here, in the space of her past. Yet it wasn't the past she was confronting, it was the present. When Rachel finally stepped into the kitchen, she saw him. Daniel, her younger brother, the one who had always seemed to glide through life, effortlessly basking in the love and attention of their parents. Daniel, whose success had always been expected. Daniel, whose life was as polished as the countertops in the kitchen he now stood in. He was talking to a group of friends, laughing, as if he didn't even recognize the quiet storm brewing inside her. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. This was his house. The very house where, years ago, their family had thrown him a party to celebrate everything they had hoped he would achieve. The house that had always symbolized the family's belief that Daniel was the one to carry the family name, the one who would live up to their expectations. And now, Rachel was here, designing his home, the very home she would never have imagined being a part of. She was the one to shape it, and he didn't even know she was the one doing it. But as she stood there, a mix of frustration and disbelief swirling inside her, she realized something else. This was her opportunity. The work she was doing here wasn't just about the design, it was about something much more profound. She had fought for this moment, clawed her way to the top, and now, her talents were being recognized. Even if Daniel didn't know it, even if their parents never knew it, Rachel was creating something more meaningful than just a house. She was creating a legacy. Later that evening, the family gathered for a housewarming party in Daniel's honor. Rachel stood at the edge of the crowd, observing her family as they fawned over Daniel's new home. They were so proud of him, so enamored with his success. They had no idea that the woman who had designed the home was none other than the sister they had always overlooked, the one who had worked so hard to make something of herself, but had never received the same accolades. It was almost poetic, the family celebrating Daniel's success, completely unaware that the one who had helped him achieve it, in some way, was standing right in front of them. Rachel could have revealed herself then. She could have spoken up, told them that it was her design that had transformed their son's house into something spectacular. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed silent, her face carefully composed. She was no longer the girl who needed their approval. She was the woman who had built her own success, and that, she realized, was enough. The world didn't need to know her name. Not when the work spoke for itself. As the night wore on, Rachel quietly slipped out of the party, leaving behind the echoes of a family that would never truly understand her journey. She had come full circle, back to the house that had once symbolized her place in the shadows. But this time, she wasn't just a guest in their story. She was the architect of her own future, and that future was far bigger than any family's expectations. The next day, Rachel walked out of the house with a sense of accomplishment that no party or praise could ever provide. She had designed more than just a home. She had designed her own redemption. And in the silence of her success, she found peace. Choice, the afterthought, the girl who had always been in the background, was once again being overlooked. She stood there, just a quiet presence in the corner, nursing a glass of wine, watching as her mother fluttered around, glowing in the attention of their guests. "Oh, Rachel." Her mother's voice cut through the noise like a dull knife. Disinterested, yet somehow cutting. "She does something in Chicago, Something with buildings, I think. Not like Daniel, the atmosphere at the party was thick with forced cheerfulness, and Rachel could feel it in her bones. The way the laughter bounced off the walls like hollow echoes, the way her family's eyes danced around her as if she were invisible. It was all for Daniel, her younger brother, the golden child of their Vietnamese-American family, the one who could do no wrong, who could do everything right. And Rachel, always the second, though. Her words hung in the air, blunt and dismissive, as though Rachel's life, her years of struggle, and her hard-won success as an architect meant nothing. Not to her. Not to anyone in this room. Rachel's heart was heavy, her chest tight with a familiar ache. The shame, the isolation, it never truly left her. Every time she thought she had pushed past it, it would sneak up on her again, settling deep in her throat, squeezing the breath from her lungs. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and for what? To be brushed aside like this? To always be a footnote in the story of her brother's success? And then it hit her. She could feel the weight of all those years, the years of being dismissed, the years of pushing herself to the limits while everyone else was allowed to just coast. But in that moment, it felt as though a switch had flipped inside her. No more silence. No more shrinking in the shadows. She was done playing the role of the quiet, unimportant sister. With a calmness that shocked even herself, Rachel set down her glass and stood up. The room seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Her legs carried her to the center of the room, her hands steady despite the fire igniting in her chest. Without a word, she reached for the microphone that had been carelessly left on a side table, her fingers closing around it with a surprising firmness. The buzz of conversation stuttered to a halt as she spoke. "Everyone, I need your attention," she said, her voice cutting through the awkward silence. Her mother's eyes flashed to her with an expression that was a mixture of confusion and irritation, but Rachel didn't care anymore. "I am the one who designed this house," she continued, each word dropping like a hammer on the wooden floor. "I am the architect behind every single detail you see here tonight." The room was still. Not a single person moved. The weight of her words hung in the air like thick smoke. Rachel's gaze swept across the room, past the guests who were all too eager to celebrate Daniel, past her mother who looked almost embarrassed, as if she had just realized the weight of what Rachel had said. "But this," Rachel's voice wavered only slightly, "this is not the first house I've built for people who once shoved me out of my own bedroom to make space for someone else." Her chest heaved, but the words came pouring out of her now, unstoppable, like a river breaking free from a dam. "I've been overlooked my entire life. I've been told I couldn't do it, that I wasn't good enough, that I should just stay in the background. Well, no more." She could hear her mother's sharp breath, feel the tension radiating from her father, but Rachel didn't stop. She couldn't. Not now. "I didn't need anyone to hand me this success. I built it on my own, brick by brick, with my own hands and my own mind. So, if you're all here tonight to celebrate Daniel, that's fine. But remember this." Rachel paused, taking a breath as she let her words settle. "You're celebrating my work, my talent, my vision. And I did it all without you." There was no applause, no cheers, just stunned silence. Her mother's face had gone pale, and her father's eyes narrowed, a mixture of confusion and something else. Regret, maybe? Shame? Rachel didn't wait to find out. She turned on her heel and walked out of the room, her steps firm and resolute. The air felt lighter as she moved through the house she had designed, the house that symbolized everything she had achieved, everything she had fought for. She didn't look back, not even once. Because in that moment, Rachel had already won. Rachel stared at her phone, the email notification sitting like a weight in her hands. It had been 2 days since the party, the confrontation that had shattered the delicate, brittle facade of her family's expectations. Her mother's words still echoed in her mind, the dismissive tone, the casual indifference with which she had reduced Rachel's years of struggle into something irrelevant. The email from her mother had arrived as soon as Rachel's name started to surface in the media. The media buzz surrounding Nest and Form, her design company, and its work for some of the wealthiest clients on the West Coast. Her mother had reached out, of course, but not with congratulations. No, it was a subtle, biting question wrapped in a veneer of concern. "If you're so good at this, why didn't you tell us earlier so we could be proud of you?" The message had read. It was as if her mother could only understand Rachel's success through the lens of validation, as if that was the only way it could hold any meaning in the family's eyes. Rachel's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing. She had built her career on her own, brick by brick, fighting for every inch of recognition. She hadn't needed their approval. But now, after everything, after the years of being sidelined, after the years of her talents and aspirations being dismissed as childish whims, Rachel felt the weight of her mother's questions settle in her chest like a stone. Why hadn't she told them sooner? Why hadn't she made them proud? The answer was simple. She didn't design for their approval. She didn't pour herself into her work for the faint hope of someday hearing the words, "We're proud of you." She had done it for herself. She had done it to prove that she was more than the quiet, forgotten girl in the corner. She had done it to build something that would outlast their indifference, something that would ensure she was never forgotten. Her fingers typed quickly, the words flowing with a coolness she hadn't expected. Her response was blunt, to the point. "I didn't design to make you proud. I designed to ensure I wouldn't be forgotten." There was no sweetness in her words, no apology. There was only the truth, the hard, unrelenting truth that had been buried deep inside her for so long. She didn't care if they were proud of her anymore. She didn't need their approval to justify her success. She had come so far, accomplished so much, and all of it had been done in the face of their skepticism, their subtle criticism, their dismissive love. She had done it all for herself. Rachel hit send. The phone screen flashed with the sound of an email being sent, but there was no relief, no sense of victory. Instead, a quiet calm washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt like she was standing tall, not just for herself, but in spite of them. The years of shrinking into the background, of putting her dreams aside to please them, had finally come to an end. She set the phone down, her hands shaking just slightly as she pushed it away. She had taken the first step in reclaiming what was hers, the validation that she had never received from them, the acknowledgement of her worth that had been so long denied. But it wasn't just a message to her mother. It was a message to herself. She was worthy of her own pride. She didn't need anyone's approval to know that. The silence that followed felt like a deep breath after years of holding it in. It was the silence of someone who had finally freed themselves from the expectations of others. It was the silence of someone who had found their voice, their power, and wasn't afraid to speak it anymore. Rachel's phone buzzed again minutes later. Another email from her mother. But this time, she didn't open it right away. She didn't need to. She already knew what it would say. More questions. More attempts to reconcile her success with their idea of what was appropriate, what was expected. It didn't matter. She had said what she needed to say. The truth was out. And for the first time in her life, Rachel felt like she was finally in control of her story.